I was exhausted. My body ached, my feet dragged against the cold pavement, and my hands trembled in my worn-out jacket pockets. The neon lights from the diner flickered behind me as I stepped into the bitter night, exhaling sharply as I tried to shake off the frustration of another long shift. Rent was due in 2 days, my daughter needed school supplies, and my car, well, that was already a lost cause. As I walked, the icy wind cut through my thin clothes, making my breath visible under the dim glow of the streetlights. But just as I turned the corner onto the narrow road leading home, a figure stumbled into view, small, shivering, and utterly lost. A little girl. She couldn't have been more than 8 or 9. Her hair clung to her damp cheeks, and she was barefoot, her dress torn. Her eyes, wide with terror, darted around as if searching for something, someone. "Hey," I called out, my voice gentle despite my exhaustion. She flinched and took a step back. I raised my hands, trying to show her I wasn't a threat. "It's okay. I won't hurt you. Are you lost?" Tears welled in her eyes, and she nodded, hugging herself. I don't know where I am." My heart clenched. There was something painfully familiar about the fear in her voice. Kneeling, I offered my hand. "It's freezing out here. Let's get you somewhere safe. We'll figure out where you belong." She hesitated, but then took a shaky step toward me. And just like that, without knowing it, I had stepped into something far bigger than myself. Something that would change my life forever. As I led the girl down the street, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. She wasn't just lost, she was terrified. "What's your name, sweetheart?" I asked as we walked. She hesitated.
"Mia."
I gave her a reassuring nod.
"Okay, Mia."
"Do you know your parents' names? Their phone number?" She shook her head quickly, eyes darting around again.
I
don't remember." A sinking feeling settled in my gut. Something wasn't adding up. I pulled out my phone. "We'll call the police. They can help find her family." "No," she gasped, gripping my hand with unexpected force. "Please. Not the police." I froze. Her fingers trembled in mine. She was terrified, and I didn't know why. But I knew one thing for sure. Whoever she was running from, it wasn't just a simple case of a lost child. And I had just gotten myself involved in something dangerous. The night was still, eerily quiet except for the occasional car passing in the distance. As I led Mia down the sidewalk, my instincts screamed that we were being watched. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement. A figure stood near the entrance of an alleyway, just barely visible under the street lamp's glow. A man. He was tall, dressed in dark clothing, and though I couldn't make out his face, I could feel his eyes locked onto us. Mia noticed him too. Her grip on my hand tightened, and she pressed against my side, shaking. "Is that someone you know?" I whispered. She gave the faintest shake of her head. Whoever he wasn't here to help. I didn't wait to find out what he wanted. I scooped Mia into my arms and hurried across the street, heart pounding. I had no idea what I had just stepped into, but one thing was clear: this little girl was in danger. And now, so was I. I didn't sleep. Even after getting Mia settled in my tiny apartment, I sat by the window, staring into the darkness, listening. And then just past 3 a.m., a knock. Soft, deliberate. I went rigid, heart hammering against my ribs. No one ever came here this late. Slowly, I crept to the door, pressing my ear against the wood. Silence. Then, another knock. Louder this time. Mia stirred from the couch, sitting up, eyes wide. I put a finger to my lips, motioning for her to stay put. Taking a deep breath, I unlocked the door and cracked it open. And what I saw made my blood run cold. A man in a black suit, expression unreadable, and behind him, a sleek black car idling on the curb. The kind of car that screamed money.
Power.
"You have something that belongs to us," he said, voice calm but chilling. Mia whimpered behind me. And just like that, I knew I had just made a very, very dangerous enemy. I didn't flinch. I couldn't. The man in the black suit stood motionless, his cold eyes scanning me, waiting for an answer. "You have something that belongs to us," he repeated, his tone sharper this time. Behind me, Mia whimpered softly. I could feel her small fingers gripping the back of my shirt. I had two options: hand her over and pretend I never saw her, or stand my ground against whatever deep trouble I had just stepped into. My gut told me that if I let her go with them, something bad would happen to her. So, I did the only thing I could. I don't know what you're talking about. My voice was firm, unwavering. The man tilted his head slightly, then smiled. But it wasn't friendly. We'll be back, he said simply. Then he turned, walked to the luxury car, and slid inside. The vehicle pulled away from the curb, vanishing into the night. I exhaled, only now realizing how tight my fists had clenched. Mia's voice was barely above a whisper. They're not going to stop. I looked down at her. Then neither will I. After locking every door and checking the windows twice, I sat down in front of Mia. Tell me the truth, I said gently. Who are those men? She hesitated, her fingers twisting in her lap. They work for my father. I frowned. Your father? She nodded. He's rich. But he's not a good person. A heavy silence hung between us. I ran away, she admitted, eyes dropping to the floor. I couldn't stay there anymore. Something about the way she said it sent chills through me. This wasn't just a rebellious kid running away from home. It was something darker. And now, I had just put myself directly in the middle of it. The next morning, I barely had time to process everything before I left for work. I'd hidden Mia in my apartment, making sure she had food and strict instructions not to open the door. But when I stepped outside, my car was gone. Not stolen.
No.
It was still there, but in pieces. The tires slashed, windows shattered. A clear message. And just in case I didn't get it, a note was taped to the broken windshield. You made the wrong choice. A cold dread curled in my stomach. This was bigger than me. And if I didn't do something fast, it would destroy everything I had left. I couldn't just sit back and wait for these people to come for me. I needed to act first. So, after making sure Mia was safe, I made a call. Not to the police. They wouldn't help with something like this. I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Who is this? A gruff voice answered. It's me, I said. I need your help. A pause. Then, you really don't want to drag me into this, man? I glanced at Mia, who was sitting on the couch, hugging her knees. I don't have a choice. Another pause. Then, finally, meet me in an hour. And bring cash. I hung up. If I was going to go up against people like this, I needed someone who understood the game. And I knew just the man. An hour later, I walked into a dimly lit garage on the outskirts of town. The man waiting for me was built like a bulldozer, scarred knuckles, tattoos creeping up his neck, eyes that had seen too much. Mason. You look like hell, he muttered, lighting a cigarette. Yeah, well, I don't have time for pleasantries, I shot back. I need information. Fast. He exhaled a long plume of smoke. On who? I slid the note across the table. He read it, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something in his expression that looked like concern. You pissed off the wrong people, man. Yeah, no kidding. He sighed, rubbing his face.
Fine.
I'll see what I can dig up. But if these guys are who I think they are, you better be ready for a war. I clenched my jaw. I already am. Mason didn't waste time. By nightfall, he had answers. Mia's father, he said, sliding a file toward me, isn't just some rich guy. I opened the folder, and my stomach dropped. The man staring back at me from the photo was Elliot Grayson, a billionaire, a man who had entire police departments in his pocket, and, more importantly, a man who made people disappear. My blood ran cold. Mia ran away from this guy? I whispered. Mason nodded grimly. And if he wants her back that bad, there's a reason. I clenched my fists. I had no money, no power, no backup. But I had one thing Elliot Grayson didn't. I had Mia, and I wasn't about to let her go. That night, another car pulled up outside my building. A different man stepped out this time, tall, slick hair, expensive suit. He knocked. I opened, standing in the doorway so he couldn't see inside. Mr. Carter, he said smoothly. I assume you know why I'm here. I said nothing. He smiled, reaching into his coat and pulling out a thick envelope. Consider this a compensation for your troubles. He placed it in my hand. I could feel the weight of thousands of dollars inside. All you have to do is step aside, he said. Let us take what's ours. I looked down at the money, then back at him, and, without hesitation, I threw it back in his face. The man's smile vanished. You just made a very costly mistake, he hissed. I stepped closer, my voice like steel. No, I said. You did. And I slammed the door in his face. I stood there for a long time after slamming the door. My pulse thundered in my ears, my hands clenched into fists. They weren't going to stop. Mia sat curled up on the couch, staring at me with wide, fearful eyes. Are they going to come back? I knelt in front of her, keeping my voice steady. They will, but I won't let them take you. Her lip trembled. What if they hurt you? I forced a small smile. They'll have to try real hard. Inside, I wasn't so sure. These people had money, power, and influence. And I was just a broke, struggling father with nothing but my instincts. But something told me this wasn't just about money or power for Elliot Grayson. There was something more, something sinister. And I was going to find out what it was. I didn't sleep. Again. Every creak of the floor, every passing car, I was on edge. I needed a plan. But before I could even put one together, someone knocked. Not the careful, calculated knock from earlier. This was loud, aggressive. Mia gasped, clinging to me. Stay in the bedroom, I whispered. Lock the door. She hesitated, then ran. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Just as a fist slammed into my face, pain exploded in my skull. I stumbled back, tasting blood. A huge man stormed in, grabbing my shirt and throwing me across the room like I weighed nothing. I hit the floor hard, gasping. You should have taken the money, the man sneered, cracking his knuckles. I wiped the blood from my mouth and grinned. Yeah, well, I lunged, smashing a lamp over his head. He staggered, growling, but I was already moving. I grabbed a chair, swung it, and sent him crashing into the wall. He groaned, dazed. I didn't stop. I kicked him square in the ribs, hard enough to make him wheeze. Tell your boss, I snarled. If he wants Mia, he's gonna have to do a hell of a lot better than sending some thug to scare me. The man gasped for air, glaring at me. Then he staggered up and ran. I panted, my body aching, but I wasn't done yet. I grabbed my phone and called Mason. We need to move, I said. Yeah, Mason muttered. I just found something. You're not gonna like it. Mason didn't waste time. He met me at a parking lot, his expression grim. Elliot Grayson doesn't want Mia back, he said. He wants her gone. I went still. What? Mason handed me a file. I flipped through it, my stomach twisting. Medical records, DNA tests, confidential reports. Then, a death certificate. My pulse stopped. Mia Grayson, declared dead 6 months ago. But she wasn't dead. She was right in front of me. I clenched my fists. Why would her own father fake her death? Mason's jaw tightened. Because she's not his daughter. I froze. Mia had been kidnapped as a baby. The people who raised her weren't her real family. Her real family, whoever they were, had no idea she was alive. And Elliot Grayson was covering it up. I felt sick. He's not trying to bring her home, I whispered. He's trying to make sure the truth never gets out. Mason nodded. And you just made yourself his biggest problem. I exhaled slowly. This was bigger than I ever imagined. And I had just put a target on my back. I raced back to my apartment. We couldn't stay there. Not anymore. Mia, I said, grabbing a bag and stuffing clothes inside. We need to go.
Now.
She looked up, confused but trusting. Where? Somewhere safe. I threw a hoodie over her, tucked her tiny hand in mine, and we ran. Down the stairs, out the back alley, into the cold, dark streets. I didn't know where we were going. But I knew one thing. I would die before I let them take her. We barely made it 3 blocks before I heard it. Tires screeching. I turned. A black SUV was speeding toward us. My blood ran cold. Run, I whispered. Mia's hand tightened in mine as we sprinted into the night. I didn't think. I just ran. Mia's small hand clenched in mine as our feet pounded against the pavement. My lungs burned, but the roar of the SUV behind us kept me moving. Faster, Mia, I gasped. The tires screeched as the vehicle swerved, trying to cut us off. An alley, narrow, dark. Our only chance. I yanked Mia with me, diving into the shadows. The SUV slammed to a stop outside, doors bursting open. Footsteps.
Fast.
Heavy. They went this way, a voice barked. I pressed Mia against the cold brick wall, my heart hammering against my ribs. The men were close. Too close. And we had nowhere left to run. A garbage bin. A loose pipe. Anything I could use as a weapon. I snatched the pipe from the ground, gripping it tightly. The footsteps got closer. Then, a figure stepped into the alley. Broad shoulders. Cold, merciless eyes.
He spotted me.
Smirked. Game over, he sneered. I didn't let him finish. I swung the pipe, smashing it into his ribs. He grunted, stumbling back. Another one lunged at me. I drove my elbow into his face. Mia screamed as a third man grabbed her.
No.
I turned, blind with rage, and slammed the pipe across his head. He dropped like a stone. Mia, run, I shouted. She bolted, and I took off after her, my heart slamming against my chest. Behind us, the men groaned, dazed but furious. We had seconds before they recovered. We needed to disappear now. I had no choice. I pulled out my phone and dialed the one number I swore I'd never call again. Mason picked up on the second ring. Where, he asked, no hesitation. I rattled off the street name. Stay put, he growled. I'm coming. Mia's breath was ragged as she clung to me. Who are you calling? A friend, I muttered. I didn't know if I was lying. But at this point, I was out of options. Mason arrived in minutes, his car screeching to a stop in front of us. I yanked the door open, shoving Mia inside. Mason barely looked at me before peeling out of there, tires screeching. You really pissed them off, he muttered, gripping the wheel. Yeah, I said breathlessly. I noticed. Mia curled up in the back seat, silent but trembling. I turned to Mason. They're not trying to bring her home. They're trying to erase her. He exhaled sharply.
Yeah.
And now they're going to erase you too. The weight of his words settled in my gut. We had nowhere left to run, and time was running out. Mason drove us to a safe house, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. We barely made it inside before he locked the doors. I turned to Mia, kneeling in front of her. I need you to tell me the truth, I said gently. Everything. She hesitated. Then, finally, my real parents, she whispered. I don't remember them, but I know they didn't give me away. Tears welled in her eyes. Elliot Grayson, he took me, she choked. And he doesn't want anyone to know. A slow, cold rage built in my chest. I had suspected as much. But hearing it from her? It changed everything. I met Mason's eyes. We need to find her real family. Mason's expression was grim. You know what that means, right? I nodded. We weren't just running anymore. We were going to war. We barely got a few hours of rest before it happened. A single gunshot. Glass shattered. Mia screamed. Mason grabbed his gun, shoving me down. They found us. I peered outside. Black SUVs surrounding the warehouse.
Dozens of them.
We were trapped. A voice echoed through a megaphone. Come out now, and maybe we'll let you live. Mia clung to my arm, sobbing. I clenched my jaw. They wanted me to surrender. But I had no intention of giving them what they wanted. Mason kicked over a table, using it for cover. They're not taking her, he growled. I tightened my grip on Mia. A flashbang exploded outside. Then gunfire. I shielded Mia as the windows blew out, glass raining over us. Mason returned fire, cursing. Go, he shouted. Get her out of here. I hesitated. But I knew he was right. I grabbed Mia and ran. Bullets tore through the walls as I sprinted down the back hallway. A door, an exit. I kicked it open and ran straight into Elliot Grayson. He was waiting,
Calm.
smiling, like he had already won. Mia gasped, hiding behind me. Elliot tilted his head. You really think you can save her? I clenched my fists. I don't think. I know. His smirk widened. Brave. Then he pulled out a gun and pointed it at Mia. Move, he said, or she dies. I didn't think. I lunged. Elliot fired, but I knocked the gun aside. Pain tore through my shoulder, but I didn't stop. I slammed into him, knocking him to the ground. The gun skidded away. We struggled, fists flying, rage exploding. Elliot was strong, but I was desperate. I grabbed a broken piece of glass and drove it into his shoulder. He screamed. I staggered back, bleeding, gasping. Mia trembled behind me. Elliot clutched his wound, glaring. This isn't over, he snarled. I smirked. Yeah, it is. The sirens wailed. Police cars flooded the street. Mason had called them, and Elliot Grayson was finally finished. The aftermath was chaos. Mia's real family had been searching for her for years. DNA tests confirmed everything. She wasn't just a missing child. She was a stolen heir. A family with power, more power than Elliot Grayson. And they wanted her back. Mia was safe. Her real family welcomed her with open arms. And me? I was just a struggling father who had stumbled into something bigger than myself. But I had made a choice. And I had won. For once in my life, I wasn't the one left behind. The luxury car pulled up outside my house days later. A man stepped out, dressed in an expensive suit. He handed me an envelope. Not a threat. A thank you. And inside, enough money to change my life. I exhaled, staring at the check. For once, I didn't feel like a failure. For once, I had done something right. And that was worth more than all the money in the world.